Hi, I'm David Davis from ActualTech Media. We're here at the brand new headquarters of Couchbase. This is an amazing facility, and I'm excited to be joined by Mr. Ravi Mayuram. He's the CTO of Couchbase. How you doing, Ravi?
Fantastic. Thanks for making the time.
Yeah, thanks for having us here. It's really an honor. So I've been learning a lot about Couchbase since I've been visiting here. Big companies, Apple, eBay, all these companies are choosing Couchbase. And so I wanted to talk with you in a little bit more depth and detail here about, let's say that I'm an application developer and I'm interested in writing a hot new application.
Yes.
I want to choose Couchbase. What's the experience like? How does that work?
Yes. So this database we developed with the sort of mindset of a modern developer. So, the last 15, 20, or maybe a little bit more, it's been object-oriented development, whereas the relational databases, the ones of the past, they didn't quite match up to what the object-oriented development was all about, and the pace and the agility with which these days you need to develop the applications. Database always became the bottleneck.
Yeah.
And so there was always this friction between the application developers and then finally working with the data tier team, and any change you want to make, you eventually have to go get a database council set up, which will review and then change the schema to allow you to get the deployment. We wanted to sort of streamline that, get away from that friction in one sense. So it's now basically purpose-built for sort of developers of this modern age. And how does it come about is because of our selection of JSON as the document format. Instead of a database imposing a new data format, use the format that's already like the lingua franca of the web,
right,
which is where all the REST endpoints spew out and all that stuff. So basically you have the data format already figured out, given to us. The second part of it is when you're programming to a sort of a database, most databases also come up with their own new language, QL, -QL. I think there's been A to Z, all kinds of QLs have been around. But only one query language has really withstood the test of time, which is sort of SQL. So Couchbase is a NoSQL database, but it does run SQL on top of it. Why? It's to be like a Tesla, imagine. Everything underneath the covers is different, but the way you drive remains the same, which is the same steering wheel and the gas pedals. So you want the same programming language. So you're familiar with how you're driving that database, but underneath the covers, our shared nothing distributed architecture, our geolocation of data, all those principles are sort of brand new, imagine, for the modern deployment, where you need both agility of development and then, deployment and scale and all those characteristics. So for a developer, this should be way more fun to sort of put Couchbase in the mix, because now your CI/CD pipeline that you are sort of on a day-to-day basis living with becomes that much easier because there is no friction.
I like the idea of Couchbase making databases fun.
Yes.
That sounds cool. So let's say that I have one of these legacy databases and I'm interested in migrating to Couchbase. What's that experience like?
That should be, that was one of our core tenets, is to make that whole migration seamless and from a developer's perspective, not unfamiliar. That's why the SQL paradigm was very important to us, which is to say that if you already know and you are working with the traditional databases, which have been around for 40 years, and they're all phenomenal for their own times. And so we are all used to, we all were brought up in that. So if you know how to program to that, programming to a NoSQL database should be in the same paradigm. You should not have to. So it should be, from the standpoint of how you will work with this, should feel very familiar. Okay. But there are a few adjustments you do have to make, as in the old data format, which was your relational, the way the schema was set up, you might have to reimagine that to be in this JSON format, a document database model. Once you understand that and you make that shift, the rest is basically, so it should be a fairly friction-free, but it requires a little bit of thought process in terms of how to, otherwise everything else is the same, then how would you gain the advantage that you want? So a few things you have to think through in the beginning, but after that it becomes, as friction-free as possible and as smooth, and it actually accelerates your development. That's the whole idea here, is that so you can innovate sooner, faster, and the agility that we all as human beings have somehow learned to do in this agile development process and all that stuff. The tooling underneath did not allow you to have the time. Now, that's the feedback we get from our customers. Now our development times have really shrunk, and we're able to get to market faster.
Yeah, well, with the massive adoption of Couchbase, I mean, it must be making these companies much more efficient and much more agile.
Yes.
So once I create my application, I migrate some data in,
Yes.
Can you talk about the performance? What would be the performance as I scale up my application?
Fantastic question, because as you can imagine, one of the reasons why people are coming is because of the sort of what broadly labeled as the digital transformation. What's really happening in our society as a whole is that people are, earlier we used to have people who will actually be sort of the middlemen. Now it's a people-driven economy wherein you and I do a lot of stuff for which there were agents before, like a travel agent was there or a bank teller was there.
Right.
Now you just do it from your device straight up. So who's doing that job? Me and you. So what does this really mean is that the scale has completely changed. Earlier you had to cater to 100,000 of these agents. Now it's millions of users directly sort of talking to your backend systems.
Yeah.
So it's like bringing the back office to the front in one sense, in front of you and me. So scale is the determining factor here. It's almost like planet scale is where some of the discussion is, or a web scale. So you need to assure a performance no matter whether you're the first user or the millionth user.
Right.
How do you achieve that? That's the secret sauce in one sense. That's one of the reasons why Couchbase has always been very popular, because of our memory and network centric architecture and what we call as a shared nothing distributed architecture. What you can do is horizontally scale the system, as in you can keep adding more capacity by stacking more compute and storage to the system.
And that's not easy to do in traditional databases.
No, traditional databases were built in what we call as a vertically scaling system, as in if you hit the bottlenecks, you have to go get a new hardware which was purpose-built to have extra capacity. Now, there are two issues there. The vertically scaling systems, imagine they are more like airplanes. Mm-hmm. If you have to add 20 more seats to an airplane, you have to buy a new airplane. You have to build a new one.
Right.
Versus this modern architecture is built like a train. Just that if you need 20 more people, just add one more coach to it, right? So what do you get? Number one, what you get is you add capacity as you need. Okay. And because of that, you get all the cost advantages too. And the third thing is that it's you don't have to go wait to be new plane to be built or new hardware to be built and assembled and brought. So you can simply buy commodity hardware and keep adding that. So that gives you that scale. And the memory and network centric. So now you're using network as the way to daisy chain these boxes, and that's how you scale. Yet by doing it the way we have done it, you get those guaranteed performance in a linear manner. So whether you're the first user or the millionth user, you get the same nanosecond response times. And this is what scaling is one side of it, but the performance has to be guaranteed. You cannot say, oh, you came a little late, so everything is going to take a bit of time.
Right.
So it's all in this personalized economy, if you will. Everybody has to be treated as though they were the very first user who walked in. And that's what this architecture really enables. And so performance at scale is one of the core sort of design principles. Yes. It's something you cannot bolt on. Mm-hmm. And so we have built it in such a fashion. And this we achieve by what we call as sort of consolidating the caching and the database tier into one. That's what you achieve by doing a memory-centric architecture. So there are no two different places to go to. A cache does something and a database something. Yeah. It's fused into one. So that gives you that sort of a scale. And the DNA of this company comes from there. Okay. So that's the performance that we guarantee no matter what the scale is.
Very nice. And I know more and more application developers are moving to Docker and Kubernetes.
Yes.
What is the support like, or what's the experience like when leveraging Couchbase with Kubernetes?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question, because that's what the world is sort of moving to, as in more and more virtualized as opposed to physical affinity to physical boxes. By virtualizing, you get the sort of abstraction, if you will, wherein you don't really need to know where the physical hardware is sitting, as long as you can sort of leverage them at the time of your need. So this is not just a database thing, it's the entire application stack is going through this. Now, databases have been notorious a little bit not to have been in the middle of it for long, because many of these Kubernetes conversations and Docker virtualized container conversations have been on the stateless applications, as you call. Yeah. Databases are the place where you go find the state.
Yes.
So you cannot lose them. Just my pod vanished is not an answer that's acceptable in a database. So that has always been a little bit difficult, but with advances in Kubernetes, and what we have done in Couchbase is a pretty innovative thing, as in we have extended the Kubernetes operator by in a manner so that we have a full picture or full control of the environment. Where is the disk? Where is the memory? Where is the sort of storage? So we know that lay of the land, and so when a pod vanishes, the data does not vanish underneath. It's still persisted in the volumes, and we can attach to that when we sort of rehydrate another pod. So that whole orchestration of this whole thing is for the first time a distributed database achieved this when we released our Kubernetes operator a few months ago. And so that gives you that ability to, in a programmatic manner, sort of scale your database just in the manner that you would do your application to your stuff. So with that, now you are able to sort of deploy and manage Couchbase through your standard virtualized environment management that you have already put in your place, and Couchbase fits into that, and that makes the whole deployment side of the equation that much streamlined and simpler and more autonomous. The older databases, you couldn't do that because of their dependency on sort of their architecture. Let me leave it at that. Right. So, but with this newer architecture, you can actually achieve this.
Very nice. Yeah, I look forward to learning more about the Kubernetes integration that Couchbase offers.
Fantastic.
So, I mean, I know a lot of our audience, they might be interested, as I am, in learning more about Couchbase and maybe trying it out. Is there a community edition of Couchbase if you want to get started?
Absolutely. We have our CE edition.
Okay.
Please go download and play with this to your heart's content. And it's got the, from a programmer's perspective, all the capabilities built in there. And so you should be able to experience that. And we have containerized versions. It's downloadable from Docker site. And so you should be able to sort of pretty quickly hydrate this and get going with your development.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
That's what we want all developers to go give this a shot, try. And if you love it, you'll do more with us. That's all we're hoping for.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time today, Ravi.
Fantastic. Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.